Today's webinar brought to you by OraSure Technologies. OraSure Technologies is a global leader in oral fluid substance abuse testing products. Their assays provide accurate and easy-to-administer testing methods to help determine the presence or absence of drugs or alcohol in a person's system. Oral fluid testing products provide simplified collection process, fast results, cost savings, with minimal risk of tampering, and drastically reduced risk of adulteration. Intercept Oral Fluid Drug Test is an FDA-cleared laboratory-based oral fluid drug testing system that enables accurate testing for drugs of abuse, including marijuana, cocaine, PCP, amphetamines, methamphetamines, barbiturates, benzodiazepines, methadone, and opiates. It is ranked as the #1 recognized brand name in oral fluid testing in 2015 National Drug Testing Industry Survey. With a fast and easy-to-administer collection process, Intercept is ideal for the workplace, criminal justice, drug treatment centers, and clinical setting screening programs, among others. This presentation has been pre-approved for 1 hour of continuing education from the Certification Commission for Drug and Alcohol Program Professionals, or CCDAP, for CAPAs, for those who attend this presentation in its entirety. You will receive information at the end of the presentation on how you can apply for that credit. Today's presentation is entitled Lab-Based Oral Fluid Drug Testing, What Doctors Need to Know, and will be presented by Nina French. Nina French is the managing partner of the Current Consulting Group, with over 24 years of experience in employee screening. Nina was Vice President of Employee Health Programs, later First Advantage. She specializes in product and business development, occupational health and wellness operations, and testing, marketing, and sales. She's worked in all facets of drug testing and employee screening operations, including SAT and compliance monitoring. Her consulting emphasis is on helping employee screening providers streamline operations, launch products, increase revenue, and retain existing clients. It is our pleasure to hear from Nina French.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining today's presentation. We have a lot of material, and so we're going to go through it quickly. And I wanted to start today with sort of explaining a piece of the title, and a piece of the title is the collector. And what we first want to acknowledge is that collectors take on different forms, and so we're assuming that those of you who've registered and attended all slightly different and similar in some ways. So, you know, when we talk about a collector, we're talking about an individual person who's performing collections on site as an independent contractor, or, you know, that you work in a collection facility, either that you own or that you know, are an employee of. So it can be the brick and mortar collection site. And very often what we're seeing is that collectors are really performing the function of a collection site, but they often also perform many of the functions of what is traditionally thought of as a third-party administrator. So the organization whose core product is collections, but you've expanded what you do in the market to include other drug and alcohol program management services. And that third bullet, I think, is important because today's focus really is on understanding oral fluid drug testing as a drug testing product in market, and looking at, as a collector, you know, this isn't collector training on how do you perform a collection. That's something that OraSure can provide and has materials. It's really about the product itself and about, as a collector, how you incorporate oral fluid drug testing into your product offering, and, you know, not see it as a threat to what you do, but a way to expand your business. And so today's agenda, we are going to cover what lab-based oral fluid drug testing is. We'll talk about the accuracy and the window of detection and drug test cheating. We're going to cover a little bit about state drug testing laws in the FDA. And the FDA is pretty important in this, both as it looks at oral fluid drug testing and the device and the collector, the testing at the laboratory, but then also as you look at some of the different devices on the market, and we'll talk a little bit about that plays a role here. We're going to talk about the trends and predictions in the market for oral fluid drug testing, and then we're going to review a SWOT analysis, and then we'll end up by talking about OraSure Technologies Intercept device and how it stands out in the market for lab-based oral fluid testing, and then cover some action items, and hopefully have some time for questions. I tend to get a little overwinded, and that sometimes gets tied up. But so today, what we want to talk about is, in general, what is lab-based oral fluid testing and what are some of the benefits of it. So looking at this from a collective perspective, we try to outline for you what are things that we think are important for you to know about lab-based oral fluid testing. So it's flexible, right? One of the benefits of it is it can be collected anytime, anywhere. The collection time is approximately 8 minutes, and so for those of you who traditionally perform urine testing, you can see immediately where that can have a benefit to the savings as you're looking at this. You know, if you're in the role of an operator who is in charge of staffing, you can immediately see how, if on average it takes 20 minutes to collect a single urine sample, how you can get some more productivity in allowing collections of oral fluid drug testing. It's legally defensible and scientifically accurate, and we're going to talk about that as we come into some of the details in the presentation. Results are available within 24 hours via the internet. So that is dependent, obviously, upon which laboratory you partner with and the result of the specimen, as well as each of you knows, when does that collection event happen. So if the collection event happens at 6 o'clock and your UPS or your FedEx pickup has already occurred, you have to hang on to that until the next day. It's obviously going to impact how quickly results are available, but you can see in general that 24 to 36 hours is the average for a negative result. We'll talk about a little bit more too, and because this obviously changes as well for positives. And I think everybody's pretty comfortable with that. What I'll say is it's similar or better than what you'll see with sort of your turnaround time and the experience of the end user for that. Eliminates the dilution issue. You can't dilute an oral fluid drug test. It is flexible, so again, it can be collected anytime, anywhere. We can't continue to put how important that is, because you're going to see how that can tie into the expansion of the products and service that you offer as a collector. It is the testing and the reporting is available through multiple laboratories, and so you can work with the laboratories that you very likely already have an integration with to perform the testing of the Intercept oral fluid drug testing sample. Also, from a sort of real-time, very trend point perspective, it is an accurate method to measure recent use. That comes into play for several different reasons. OSHA, for those of you who are aware of the new OSHA requirements going into effect on November 1st, OSHA specifically talked about using a drug testing device that measures impairment, and those of you who are in the industry knows that there is no drug testing device or drug test that measures impairment. And so oral fluid drug testing, because of the window of detection, which we're going to go into detail about, gives you a much closer result for recent use, and with some slides to help you understand what that means. But that's important for OSHA. It's important for clients who are doing post-employment testing, like post-accident and reasonable suspicion. And it's also a really good device when people are concerned, and we're seeing this a lot with marijuana. They're concerned with sort of balancing using drug testing as an effective pre-employment screening tool, but not wanting to be as invasive into longer-term past use. I'm going to show you how this is a super effective tool in continuing to get great results from the laboratory that are very evaluative assessment tools of candidates, but also can help you answer that question when it comes up to you from the end user. And it is often easy. It's easy to administer, and so it's often preferred by people who administer tests. And again, if you're used to using or doing a lot of urine collections, you're certainly comfortable with it. But we do hear that it's often a method for a number of the reasons we mentioned above. When you look at some of the benefits, we'll hit some of these. Gender collector issues are eliminated. So for those of you who do observe collections, or for those of you who have clients who are looking for or concerned about adulteration and opportunities to adulterate, is always observed, but you don't have to worry about the gender issues. The collection process tends to be less embarrassing for the donor. It eliminates the need for a lot of the precautions that you have to do at a collection facility, like the bluing in the toilet, eliminating the access to water. So some of those things really go away. And then it eliminates the time and cost of shy bladder issues, the private bathroom facilities that are required. It's very adulteration proof. So can it not be done? No. I mean, theoretically it can be. So I don't want anybody to sort of raise their hand and say, oh, no. It can be. But it really eliminates, compared to urine, the ability to adulterate a specimen. And again, it's that sort of factor, or how people are comfortable with the collection process sort of diminishes using oral fluid drug testing. So when we look at based oral fluid drug testing, it's growing in popularity. And for some of the reasons is it's because it's really not urine. And so it's impossible, or very near impossible, to cheat on. It provides an accurate lab-based result. And the approval by DHHS is imminent now. The team from OraSure is on the phone, and they may say, oh, imminent, knock on wood. But that is in the process. It's been in the process. And so as you're looking for what's coming and planning from a business perspective, it's important to realize that this is coming. And that's why we are, doing this specific training for collectors today, because it's important to be planning on how the trend and how this change and how the growth of this product is going to be important to you moving forward as you grow your business. Final bullet is it reduced the time to conduct a drug test. So that's an important thing when we look at both the experience, but it's also super important when you're looking at your staffing, your load balancing, and revenue stream as you're doing collections in either on-site or at your facility. Some of the common myths we're just going to lay out here, we'll go in through the detail of them through the presentation, and you'll get a copy of this presentation so you can look in the details of the slides that are coming up. But there's this idea from some people that it is still not, oral fluid testing is not accurate, and that's just the incorrect assumption. It's a myth, and it's not true. And there's data throughout the presentation and available through many labs and many tests that provide you information that really says this is just a myth through and through. The window of detection is too short. We're going to talk in detail about the window of detection, both from the near-term perspective of it, how quickly you can detect drugs compared to some of the other testing methodologies, and we're going to talk about what the positivity rate is like in terms of window of detection to show you that it's really not too short. Marijuana can be detected, and when we talk about Intercept oral fluid drug test at the end, we're going to show you about how marijuana is detected. It's just a false perception out there. It is not as susceptible to cheating. We've talked about that. It is an FDA-cleared device, and that's important, and it's important for you to understand the difference and why that's critical as you explain to your clients the benefits of oral fluid drug testing. Making the switch is too complicated. I've done this for 24 years, and I can tell you that one of the things that people make the mistake is they try and eat the elephant all in one sitting. Oral fluid drug testing, both to your business as a collector and to end user as an employer, is an easy implementation. It does not have to be an all or none thing. So adding it into your policy, it can be added and it can be an alternative specimen, and then it can, into, as a rollout happens, the sole testing methodology that you use, or it can be combined. And so if you've got current DOT, but you want to get comfortable with using oral fluid because we know that's going to come for DOT, you take that approach. The switch is not complicated. And it doesn't require a national rollout at a single time if you don't want it to. It certainly can be, but it's not something that has to be done. And then the return on investment is not competitive. There is a lot of information on how you can make the return on investment for employers, what's important about it, and we'll talk about that when we talk about some of the testing events and reasons for tests. Who consider it? We're going to talk about the markets in some of the upcoming slides, but just to plant some seeds, this is not an all-inclusive list, but companies who don't currently conduct drug testing because lab-based urine wasn't something they wanted to do, they thought it was too invasive, they didn't have the facilities, they had people in trailers or in yards, railroad yards. It's a great option for them. When thought companies, who had expense and they thought they wanted to diminish or get rid of their program, there are ways that you can show them that oral fluid drug testing can be a really good investment to pick up a program that they may have discontinued. And then for those companies who are in rural areas, who have 24/7 operations, who work in safety-sensitive positions where they're doing post-accident and reasonable suspicion drug testing, but it's difficult to figure out how to administer, those are great places to look at opportunities for expanding into lab-based oral fluid drug testing. And so some of those markets might be construction, manufacturing, hospitality, retail, staffing, occ health centers. Ideas, by no means inclusive. If you operate and service clients who are outside of workplace drug testing, if you don't, but you're thinking of expanding into those markets, probation, parole, prisons, drug courts, schools, and other non-workplace markets are very familiar with oral fluid drug testing, and they are ways to expand your business beyond what you may be doing now and the types of clients that you're servicing now. We also have somewhere in one of these slides coming up the international market. So if any of you are looking at international expansion, oral fluid drug testing is not only accepted in many countries it's the norm. And so as we see those trends and predictions, you're going to see oral fluid drug testing is something that is expanding, not retracting. So let's talk about accuracy, because that's going to be pretty critical. From an industry consulting perspective, it's probably the single most critical thing that we talk about when we talk about drug testing for employers. It is, plain and simple, oral fluid provides a blood equivalent result. We're talking about marijuana, but we're talking about, testing and accuracy. Yes, for the parent drug, not just the metabolite. And that's how you're able to get the detection of recent use more accurately than with urine. We typically is only going to detect those metabolites, not the parent drug. The number of that can be tested for is expanding. And so you'll see that where I think, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I can't remember sort of when it changed, there was only ability to test for, quote unquote, the standard 5-panel. You can see that many of the laboratories can test for expanded panels now, and that's important for some employers in some specific markets. Really don't take my word for it. They're empirical data, and like I said, look at some of the data that both OraSure can provide for you and the laboratories can provide for you. They can give you empirical data on how accurate it is. It is an FDA-cleared device, so that in and of itself is important because the process of becoming FDA cleared means that there were standards that the device and the process had to adhere to. And so that alone tells you that it's accurate and to standard that met the FDA's requirements. There's a history. You have clients who are interested in switching, but they still feel like it's a new concept. Work with the team and ask for referrals. If it's new to you, it's not new to everybody else. So there are referrals from satisfied customers that you can talk to that can give you information on how the rollout went, how satisfied they are with the result, how the client and candidate experience improved. And those are important things and readily available. Your own internal research. So there are really inexpensive ways to be looking at your client base now, to be looking at some of the issues that you're experiencing as a collector, that you're experiencing as you're expanding your business, and some of the limitations, especially if you have a brick and mortar site or if you're going on site to perform some of those collections. Do some internal research, right? So look at the opportunity, look at some of the struggles that you're having with providing your service, having adequate bathroom facilities when you go on site to perform a collection, being able to limit the access to the water when you're in, a multi-stall setting, being able to go on site to a remote construction facility, and using a porta potty. Look at some of the ways that you can see opportunities in front of you that you cringe or that you shy away from and you don't do or don't go after, and see where you can insert lab-based oral fluid drug testing, because you can do that, and your own internal research will show that it's accurate when you compare those exact same settings and opportunities and the outcomes from those. You're going to see that it's an accurate testing method. And then some of these things are simple. Working with the team at OraSure, we're going to talk about how long they've been around and how good the team is and how good the science and technology is behind the device. So you know that you're doing business with a very solid company. This is not somebody that just popped up a little bit ago. And then look at that package insert information and put it to test. The information in that packet, that FDA clearance, and it's part of sort of attesting to the device and the company that you're working with. When we talk about detection time and accuracy, the transfer to oral fluid from blood occurs as long as the drug is in the bloodstream. So we're talking about the front end and the back end of detection when we're talking about the importance of detection times in oral fluid. So the detection time starts within minutes of ingestion. Why important? Post-accident, real suspicion. The tail end is it continues for as long as the drug remains in the bloodstream. Okay, so it's as effective as urine and comparable over time. We have a chart that shows some of the positivity rate, and from my own experience working within a TPA, I can tell you the positivity rates using. I was one of the very first adopters and believers in oral fluid drug testing, and historically from I don't want to know how long ago, but from a very long time ago, looking at the data from our clients, and this was not a little sampling. We're talking about 2 million to 3 million drug tests done a year. When we looked at that data, we saw that the positivity rate was the same or sometimes higher. And that's because you're getting that closer window. That's because when you're going on site, you can do the collections quickly, and sometimes you don't see the delay in the collection process for the donors coming in to have the collection done. And so you'll see that the window of detection and the positivity rate remains consistent. So when clients are asking if that's an issue, you have empirical data to show them. The window of detection is dictated by manufacturer collectors. Every drug has a unique window. That information is readily available. None of this is secret. But you can get all of that information on detection time from the team at OraSure, and you can look at the individual drugs being tested and see what you can expect as you roll out oral fluid drug test. So let's get some details on it. But I'm going to just point right to the chart. The chart is going to show you how oral fluid drug testing starts sooner. It lines right up with that blood testing. And it goes a little bit shorter, but again, when you're doing testing on site, you can sometimes get in there and do it quicker. When you're looking at random selections, people aren't able to delay. They come in and do the collections quicker, or you can go on site. And so that's an important benefit to employers. I know that at collection sites, you don't want to say, all right, oral fluid drug testing eliminates the collector. It doesn't have to eliminate the collector in the process. And when we look at this expanding to DOT testing, there's a very high probability that it's not going to eliminate a collector. And so for you, you want to start looking at the end user, the employer, and talking to them about the benefits of you using lab-based oral fluid to come on site, or for them to come to your facility. But the ability to come on site to perform those collections for them is greatly expanded, and often for random, reasonable suspicion, and I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent about the importance of those, but when you do those things, the ability to manage those in different types of employer settings, different environments, job fairs, those types of things, it's really great to introduce oral fluid drug testing because it expands what you can do with those clients. I'm going to pause for a second, and this is in the deck, but I'm going to say that as we look as an industry at marijuana, at legalized recreational marijuana, at opioids and opiate addiction, as we look at rising health care costs, the impact to safety and employers, the rising workers' compensation average claim costs, it's going to become more and more important for employers to look at post-employment drug testing as a means of reducing employee turnover, as a means of impacting the cost of health care, and impacting the cost of workers' compensation and unemployment compensation claims. And fluid drug testing can be an excellent way to do that. And as a collector, you being able to go on site to help perform those duties and your ability to offer that to employers are going to make them more likely to say is something we're willing to look at. So you have to be, again, really a great partner to those guys going in and saying, this is what we see as an industry, why this is more important, right? It's all about the bottom line for employers. So drug testing is important. Drug testing in a post-employment setting is very important, and these are the reasons why: healthcare costs, workers' comp costs, unemployment claims, those sort of things. And you can introduce oral fluid drug testing and your role as an on-site collector in performing those functions for them as a way for them to actually save money, not spend additional money. So sort of get rid of that, because I think it's going to be really important. When we talk about the positivity rates, we talked about this a little bit, but you can see that overall the positivity rates, both by drugs, and the overall positivity rate is very competitive, very similar to what employers see when they're using urine testing. And so take this data and use this data, because it's something that you can provide to employers if they have a concern about what the window of detection will look like, and if they are, quote unquote, missing any drug test opportunities. Drug test positives. And so, the myth, urban legend, whatever you want to call it, is that marijuana can't be detected in oral fluid. And I have to tell you, I don't know where this started, and maybe this is something I could have got some more data on before we did today's my gut tells me that a large part of this had to do with the concept of the wind action. Other assumption is that a little bit to do with confusion. Lab-based oral fluid, we previous slide, extremely good at detecting marijuana, right? I think possibly where this mix-up and myth came in is the confusion between a oral fluid device and collection and process and testing versus an oral fluid device. And if you look at the data on instant oral fluid devices, we're going to talk a little bit about FDA, but we're going to talk about its ability to detect marijuana. And that, I think, is where some of the confusion comes in. But use the statistics on the previous slide, and you'll see that isn't an issue. And so we talked a lot about this already. We talked about that it is detectable. We talked about using the parent drug in the testing process. We're going to talk a little bit more about lab-based versus POCT and where some of that confusion came in. And we already talked about the ability to provide that long than the POCT devices on the market. And I'll cover this a bit, but super important to understand that this is not a response product. So some people say POCT is point of collection testing. Some people call it point of testing. You know, POCT in the industry is generally thought of as something they're going to get a result of immediately. This is going to be shipped to a laboratory for testing and is not going to provide an instant result. Therefore, you're not going to see this issue with the positivity, especially the positivity with marijuana. So again, not going through each one of these because we're at half hour through and we're not going to get through each of these slides. But it's important to look at the statistics and the data to squash the rumors. So I see some questions come in and I can't answer them sort of during the course of today's webinar, but you can look and see that oral fluid is detectable, how it's detectable, and for some of you, yes, it is. It doesn't matter how you get the marijuana in your system, whether it is edible or it's smoked or it's done through a vapor bong. You can, however you get it in your system, it is detectable. It doesn't. There's no difference in what oral fluid drug testing can pick up. We're going to a little bit about cheating. Those of you who are doing collections know that it is an issue. I guarantee that you are entertaining dinner conversation to be able to tell stories about some of the ways that people have tried to cheat a drug test, some of the ways that you as a collector or you as a collection site organization have tried to prevent them from cheating. But as you know, it happens, and so you'll see some of the information. I will tell you that if you or look up on any search engine, drug testing, you get as much information that is legitimate to the industry as you do about you get as much information about cheating and how to beat a drug test as you do about a drug test and the technology or, sales, anything. Really, they come up equally. What we find is drug test cheating about oral fluid drug testing, and that's because it's very difficult to adulterate. The collections are taking place in front of both the donor and the person administering the test. Swing samples, there's really no sleight of hand of taking that intercept oral fluid collector. You're looking at them and swapping something out. There's no putting a baggie full of something in your pants, right, and trying to swap it out. It is thousands of hits on the internet for cheating a urine test, but there's really only a handful of oral fluid testing, and some of them, in fact, say specifically you're kind of out of luck. Right? So you're out of luck if you're trying to find out how to pass a drug test. You can see that they say just try and avoid the test because it's difficult to adulterate and it's difficult to avoid, and the detection windows are similar to that of urine. So again, when you're looking at what are the benefits to an employer, these are important things to point out to them. When you're looking at how you as a collection site or how you as a collector are sort of that issue, the things that you have to do, the time that it takes. When I'm seeing these things, I'm looking at two different things. I'm looking at people coming into your site and sort of what you have to do at the collection site to prevent adulteration, and then I'm thinking about you going on site as a collector and the things that you can do to collect for one or more individuals. Those things take time. Time is money, and so the quicker, more efficiently, and more accurately that you can perform your collections, the more profitable you become. Just pretty simple math. You don't need to have an MBA from Harvard to figure that out. And so those are important things that you talk about when you're looking at integrating oral fluid drug testing into your product. I'm going to go over in a heck of a lot of detail, but you understand that it eliminates the concerns about drug test cheating. Think about how that impacts you as a collector and the ways that you can take those benefits and communicate them to the end user employer, and the added costs for you and the employer of just taking the precautions required. And it's as simple as some of the just that you spend, and then looking at the employer experience with dilute specimens. They were able to dilute on site, right? They're water hydrating. So look at some of the ways that those cost employers by having to go back and have a second specimen collected and do a second test. How many of the reported results from the laboratory are adulterated or substituted, and then they have to go back and have an additional test done. They may not. I mean, that's based on their policy. But look at what those costs are. I got news for you. What they have to do if it's adulterated is they've got to go get another candidate. That means you're not going to have the same issue because you're probably going to have a positive with if they can't adulterate it, right, there's a good chance they're going to be a positive using an oral fluid drug test. But look at all of those costs that I think are traditionally thought of as soft costs to employers, and be sure that you can articulate them as benefits to using lab-based oral fluid drug testing as an employer. And then this is a study that shows what some of, the comparison of Intercept oral fluid test results to urine test results, and a specific client with Iowa DOC, and showing, again, we talked in the very beginning of look at some of the recommendations and get real life examples, because those are sometimes the most relevant to employers and to solving the solution that they're looking for. And so zero in this particular case, diluted and traded samples, and it was a significant issue. It was 5% of their urine tests, and that's despite the best efforts of collectors to eliminate the ability to dilute a specimen or attempt an adulteration. And so it makes it harder to beat the drug test, and it gives them the upper hand, their clients, and that was a direct quote from an end user client. So it's important, again, to use the information to be able to expand your knowledge and expand your client's knowledge of what oral testing can be a benefit for them. And then we talked about a lot about what oral fluid is from a benefit in terms of window of detection. Our clients, in terms of early detection, in a specimen. Also important to know that for clients who are looking at hair testing and oral fluid, you still have that positivity rate that is similar. But when people are considering hair testing, which is sometimes an on-site collection, window of detection being so significantly long, is often not seen as a benefit to employers. It's actually now seen as something that some employers are saying that's of a look back. We want to go back that far. We want to go into a more tighter window of detection when we're assessing our pre-employment candidates, and we certainly can't use hair testing when we're looking at post-employment testing for reasonable suspicion and post-accident, because simply it doesn't materialize into the sample quickly enough to be a viable specimen for that that type of testing. And so when you're looking at testing, there are great advantages of oral fluid testing over hair testing. When you look at urine testing, you want to think about some of the benefits of lab-based oral fluid testing, about the accuracy, right? The legal defensibility. There are many places where you can't, or many programs where PCT testing is not allowed, either by state law or by policy of the company. So you want to be careful to understand the state laws that regulate instant testing in each of the different states. But I think the last bullet resonated the most for me, is that employer using instant urine, if they're collecting it themselves, with to maintain the program integrity. How do you have a copy of each of those results? How do you ensure that somebody using instant urine, they're accurately recording, so that 6 months from now they don't look back and say, we don't know if John's specimen was positive or negative, we didn't record, or we don't know that we didn't tested everybody. Liability as an employer in not performing drug testing across an employee segment or across the organization as a whole. There has to be justification. We're doing it just for safety-sensitive employees. We're doing it just for pharmacy access employees. We're doing it just for, a certain segment of the population. But it has to be applied with discriminatory practices, and it has to be applied uniformly based on your company policy. And so the recording of an instant urine test becomes a challenge unless the employer has a really manual process. And then adopting something like that across large organizations and national or regional employers becomes challenging, and it's difficult. So again, when you're going back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier, like the ability to implement lab-based oral fluid testing, these are some of the things that you can think about when you've got someone who is comparing an alternate specimen type and you want to introduce lab-based oral fluid testing. Finally, instant oral fluid testing, you can see the restrictions in the POCT testing, which is applicable to the last slide as well. You can see that some state laws require all positive screens to be confirmed by a laboratory and to be verified for by an MRO. So those are things that impact instant oral fluid and instant urine testing. There are some states that have very specific result reporting requirements, including a written notification of a positive or a negative, the ability to produce that notification, and like we just said, right, if you're sort of photocopying a cup or photocopying a device, all of that becomes a challenge. And then get into this idea of an FDA-cleared device, and with one exception, there are not instant fluid testing devices that are FDA-cleared. This is our nice little segue into state law and FDA clearance, because some people, and to some degree rightfully so, get confused about what does the U.S. Food and Drug Administration have to do with my employee testing. And so what you're going to find out is that lab-based oral fluid is legal in all, but I'm going to put jurisdictions, 3, but we give the details about Vermont and San Francisco, that there's some limited testing. San Francisco, no jurisdiction, that's why we don't say states. San Francisco and Boulder, Colorado actually have different drug laws than the states that they are part Maine permits oral fluid, but it requires compliance with federal regulations. So you're going to want to keep abreast of these changes because often you see that some of the state laws, voluntary or mandatory, reference and sort of, for those of you who are more comfortable with saying sort of DOT testing, DHHS approved testing, but they reference those in their laws. And so when lateral fluid becomes allowable for those testing, it's going to sort of automatically switch and remove those restrictions for the states in which lab-based oral fluid testing are currently restricted, or for the voluntary programs in which they're restricted. So be mindful of that and get updates to this slide. If you provide the service, you can get updates for this information. But you're going to see a lot of those restrictions change if they reference SAMHSA compliance in their laws. What the FDA has to do with it, we've got several slides on what the FDA has so that you can refer back to them because it does tend to be confusing. But it's really important to know that the Intercept oral fluid drug test is an FDA cleared device. The FDA has, there's some idea of does it have jurisdiction over workplace drug testing, but in general, to be comfortable with your level of risk, you're going to use an FDA-cleared device. It all comes down to a concept within the workplace. That legal concept is about sort of the fruit of the poisonous tree. And this is detailed for you in the next 3 slides. But for any of you who's ever heard of a show, Law and Order, the idea is of an illegal search and seizure, right? So it's the fruit of the poisonous vine. So using a non-FDA cleared device means that if the positive result is challenged at the end, the challenge can go all the way back to the use of a non-FDA device. And that is going to sort of nullify, in a sense, the accuracy of the result. Now, it may or may not, but the idea is that since that information was, or since that device was not, had not undergone the stringent requirements to get clearance by the FDA, that there's a question about whether or not it's a valid device and it could have been used in the first place. And so read these slides in detail. We don't have time to go over them in detail, but this is really important for using workplace drug testing and using an FDA-cleared device, because that's where some of those very cheap, inexpensive products come into play, and they are not the same. They're not even close to the same. And so, read the slides, understand the concept of what it is, and understand how it's applicable to your ability to sell and how these are apple oranges. And an FDA clear orange, a lot of liability and risk to employers in workplace drug testing. So we're going to now transition into why lab-based oral fluid testing is important and why sell it. And so some of the trends that CCG does is we look at, and this is not meant to be an accusation against you as a collector, but this is a trend that we saw in the industry, that the collection costs are going up. So you as collectors need to look at ways to combat what either a perception or reality in the industry, that the collection costs are going up. And so people are looking at ways to limit the cost of collection, and your ability to perform on-site tests and your ability to perform or reduce the time that your employees are spending doing an individual collection may impact your ability to reduce your cost of collection. So that is how this is important, and oral fluid drug testing can be a significant way to do that. If you can replace a percentage of your on-site and in-office collection events, do them quicker, faster, and not have issues with accuracy where you have to not charge for a collection event, then it's going to impact your ability and your costs in performing those, and maybe what your price is going to look like as you move, through the next couple of years and you see the costs expanding. So look at some of these trends. When we surveyed the industry, this is on industry, you see that there's a great interest and that people are anticipating that the interest in oral fluid drug testing is going to expand in terms of the sales. The way that people are approaching, we proactively offer lab-based oral fluid testing. If you are a collector and you don't know how to articulate to employers, how to articulate to your TPA partners, how to articulate to your local market, you use oral fluid drug testing as a business, then you're going to start missing out on these opportunities. So it's important to know that people are proactively using it, and so it's important for you to be able to say, all right, we know, and here's how we are a part of that as a collector. When you look at the screening challenges for employers, you can see that reducing time to hire, verifying information, having accurate information, all of these things are very important to end user employers. And this slide shows you that fluid drug testing answers all of the challenges that employers are saying, this is important to us. So reducing time to hire. The turnaround time is equal to or better than traditional lab-based urine. Go through this. Look at the accuracy in verifying information and how oral fluid drug testing answers the accuracy issue, right? Getting quality information, providing a positive candidate experience. Oral fluid answers many of the top challenges that employers are stating to our industry, important to them in an onboarding perspective. And then be as comfortable with a source. I hope each of you knows what that is. Strengths, opportunities, weakness, and threats, right? So look at the way that you can communicate the strengths, the opportunities, both with and then the threats within your organization. So look at this from internally as a business, and then look at ways to communicate and understand how to communicate this to the end user employees as you're expanding your business into oral fluid drug testing. Be able to sell to the value of it. And the value of it is the ability for you as a provider to control the costs of your product, and then from an employee perspective, the ability, the impact that has on them, right? So if they're hesitant to do post-employment testing and to do testing at job fairs and to roll out a significant and a robust drug testing program, oral fluid can often help you, can be part of determining that ROI for the employer. And then for you, there's value in maintaining and controlling costs. So what are the strengths? We've talked about many of these already, right? So, be comfortable knowing the legality. Be comfortable knowing that it's soon acceptable for the DOT programs. We don't have an exact timeline. We're hoping that, and the elections are definitely impacting when we're going to hear about when it'll be allowed for DOT programs and what next steps processes are that. But we're hoping to hear an update either for the election or it's going to be delayed until after the election. But we're hoping to hear something by the end of 2016 that will allow us to zero in on when DOT drug testing. I would say, and I know the team from OraSure can do a follow-up if I misstate, but I would say from perspective within the next 18 months we're going to see significant movement and likely the ability to do DOT testing. I'd say 24 at the very far outside, but I think it's going to be pretty much significantly shorter than that. So be comfortable with the strengths. The weaknesses, right? So it's not urine. And so the reality is there are a lot of policies that only state urine testing is available. You've got to be able to convince people that you don't have to do what you're comfortable with. Benefits to step inside of that box. But a weakness because some people aren't interested, right? This is what we do. This is what we want to do. This is what we're going to do. It is not currently permitted under DOT drug testing regulations. It's pending that notice of proposed ruling, and like we said, we're going to see that coming up shortly. So now's the time to prepare. You know, as a business owner, you're preparing into 2017 and 2018 in terms of your business strategy and planning, and so it's important to be looking that is going to be a reality. What you don't want to happen is for it to hit and you not to be prepared on how to offer. You're chasing your competition on how you can offer oral fluid drug testing for both regulated and non-regulated programs. And then you have to be comfortable dispelling the myths that we've talked about. You know, the limits of detection, the ability to detect marijuana. You have to be comfortable because it's not as widely known. And some people think it's new. It's not. So be comfortable with knowing that's a weakness and how to answer when people think that's a weakness. The opportunities, SAMHSA developing the regulations, make this critical for you as a collector to be able to understand how to integrate it into your business model. Legalized marijuana laws. Testing is a great way to answer that, that long tail at the end of the detection. If people are concerned, keep in mind it is still illegal federally, but if people are concerned in states where legal either recreationally or medically, oral fluid's a great opportunity to discuss that. And you can, when you get comfortable with that window of detection and the discussion around that, it's a great way to talk about maintaining drug testing, but still being a competitive employer because you're using oral fluid drug testing, and you're not going to lose all your candidates because you're still drug testing. International, we talked about, it is very friendly in very many countries, and so if you're looking to expand that area, or if you're servicing clients now locally, have wider footprints, oral testing is a great way to expand into those opportunities. Transforming your collection site business from a local provider, right? So if they are, people aren't going to come to us if they're more than 15 miles away. Look at expanding from being a local provider of collection services to a TA, then service regional and do that through the ability to offer oral fluid drug testing to the employer outside of those who might use you to collect oral fluid or who might use you to collect urine. You can have that integrated approach using the two technologies or a single oral fluid lab-based technology to service a wider audience and a wider employer. And so that's an important way to expand your business. And then the ability to provide on-site testing services for multiple people in a quicker way, and to be able to service those employers who may not have adequate bathroom facilities. All great opportunities for you to use lab-based oral fluid. Safety-sensitive workplaces, again, either providing the device and acting as the TPA if there's not an opportunity for you to be a collector, right? But don't run servicing that client. Do elections when you can. Offer when you can. The reality is sometimes there is going to be an employer who's not wanting to use a collector. So be able to offer the technology so that you can still be a full-service provider and equal some of the services that you do at a collection site. Think about rural work sites. Look at an alternative for people who are leaning away because of the legal marijuana laws. We've talked about that a whole lot. And look at some of the other markets that are very comfortable with oral fluid drug testing, like criminal justice, treatment, and schools. And there's some opportunities to expand your market. And then again, we've covered these threats, right? The uninformed sellers. You need to be informed so that you can be the best practice resource for employers, the best practice resource for your business, and look at what your plan is where you're making money, where you're losing money, and look at some of the ways that oral fluid drug testing can answer those questions for you. But those are threats. You've got to know where it's prohibited. You've got to know that federal laws are that now, right, for DOT specifically require, but can for what the future is going to look like in this industry. And finally, let's talk a little bit about OraSure and Intercept. We talked a bit in the beginning about how some people think this is a new technology or question the accuracy. That you can get, it's at your fingertips. More than 15 million samples, and my guess is that this slide's out of date, right? So it's more than 10 years of proven performance. There's more than 15 million samples tested. Those numbers are going to continue to increase as PAs and as collection sites are leading with oral fluid because of so many of the benefits, because of the trends in the U.S., right, with legalized marijuana, because of some of the requirements we're seeing from like OSHA and of post-accident testing, because of the ability for 9 FDA-cleared assays, right? So you have an expanded panel now. Because Intercept has been upheld in multiple court cases, in workplace and criminal justice and in family courts, right? Intercept is consistently recognized as the #1 brand name for oral fluid drug testing. And all of those things are important when you are selling this product and when you are expanding into oral fluid. Testing with a partner or partnering with OraSure is tried and true. And so when you're looking at people saying, urine testing is tried and true, well, so is OraSure Technologies and so is Intercept. Direct observed collections, right? Cheat, quick and convenient. Now, this one says 5 minutes. I don't know. I'm sure, each one of you, if we said raise your hand and give us your average turnaround, average collection time. I've heard people say that they can collect urine in as short as 8 to 10 minutes. I've also heard where as a business, collectors sort of say it's 20 minutes of collector time, but, sort of in and out the door. But look at the comparison as a collector and see where those minutes add up in your ability to be productive. It eliminates shy bladder. Some of those, right, the shy bladder, that takes a heck of a lot longer than 20 minutes. And so those are important to factor into the, cost or indirect costs of collecting urine that Intercept eliminates. The negative results from an employer, from a perspective and time hire, you're going to see those be the same or better than urine. Remember, it's a lab-based test, so you're not seeing instant results, but you're going to see those similar to what you see with a standard urine testing. And there's not a heck of a lot of training. So one of the things that's important to me is, having been an employer and looking at when you onboard a new employee, how quickly can you get them up to speed? This is one of the first products that they can start to administer as a collector, as they're getting their DOT certification, as you're training them. OraSure provides the training, and getting a collector trained to support oral drug testing is quick and easy, and so it saves you money, and it makes that investment in the employee as a collector turn around faster. So that's a return on investment that you need to think of as well. And so what can you walk away with today? We're a little over, so we're going to run through them quickly, but in terms of action items, look at existing clients, high volume of remote locations, look at some of the industries that we said are really good for oral fluid drug testing, and look at what your opportunities are outside of your standard service area and offer oral fluid drug testing. Evaluate your market and evaluate your opportunity, and start this not as a concept, but start to do this as an action plan. Identify clients who have OSHA requirements, who have post-accident needs, who have reasonable suspicion needs, and start to look at ways to introduce oral fluid on-site testing or to provide an interceptor oral fluid device for them to round out their employee testing offering. And again, conversant with the trends in industry, with expanded panels and the impact and cost to employers on workers' comp claims, on unemployment claims, and be able to show them that using oral fluid drug testing on site or bringing you in saves them money in those costs longer term. And keep abreast of the updates, right? So look at what the collector requirements are going to be for DOT testing. We don't know yet, but there's likely to be a role. And so be prepared and get ahead of your competition by knowing what they're going to be and be operationally ready, and be ready as a business, who you're going to market to, know what you're going to do with DOT and non-DOT testing and the role of a collector. So be ready and keep abreast of those updates. We mentioned how as the DOT requirements go into play, there's also going to be changes to where it's allowed for some of the voluntary laws and some of the mandatory laws. So know that. And then contact your OraSure rep if you don't know who that is. Just send an email in and contact the rep. Get the training materials. Get the educational resources. Get the data that I talked about here, so you are armed with it and you're educated on it, and you can move immediately from an educational session today into an action plan for expanding your business. And so I'm going to wrap quickly. We do have some questions. I tried to incorporate those as I went through, and I saw them popping up on the screen. But we will follow up and make sure that every question that was asked today is answered with the follow-up and the recording from today's training. You?
Thank you, Shamina. And on behalf of OraSure Technologies, we hope you have found today's presentation informative and helpful. This presentation was recorded, and you will receive instructions informing you how to access the recording. Additionally, if you asked a question today that was not answered, we will have a representative contact you with that answer. The presentation has been pre-approved for 1 hour of continuing education from CDAP or CSAFAs for those who have attended this presentation in its entirety. Please email Jessica Polk at info@currentconsultinggroup.com if you'd like to receive more information about receiving this credit. Again, the email is info@current, C-U-R-R-E-N-T, consultinggroup.com. Thank you, and this concludes today's webinar.